Well, hello everyone. Welcome to SQL Querious. This tutorial is a series of short videos that cover SQL challenge puzzles and break down the steps of forming a great SQL query. If you're new to SQL, it's a database language that's simple to learn but difficult to master. If you think you might be interested in SQL but aren't quite sure, then you might be SQL Querious. Now today we have an interesting puzzle. We'll start by jumping into our Postgres application, which is a database administration tool. It's run off of the computer but through the browser. And here I have a select all from employees, which is a table that has all sorts of profile information on employees, including the first name, last name, email, hire date, department, the salary, all such and such information. And what I'd like to do today is I'd like to formulate a query that has a total count of employees that work for each department. And so now if I do a select distinct department from employees, you'll see it returns each particular department: pharmacy, camping, tools, maintenance, so on and so forth. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to get a total count of how many employees work for each one of these departments. And so I'll give you a moment to pause the video and think through how you might solve this query, and we'll come back with a couple of hints. So hopefully you've had a moment to think about that. So the hints for this puzzle are, assuming that we're going to narrow our search down to 4 departments, let's say that we have the departments sports, tools, clothing, and computer. What we're going to need to do is we're going to need to use a combination of the sum aggregate function. We're also going to need to use the case function, and we're going to need to make a comparator between 1 and 0. And then we're going to need to return those in columns. So I'll let you pause the video for another moment to think through how you might solve this, and we'll come back with the solution. Alright, so hopefully you've had a moment to try to attempt that on your own. So we know that we're going to need to have 4 columns. We're going to have a column for sports, tools, clothing, and computer. And so we'll have the column sports, tools, clothing, and computers. Except rather than just have those columns, what we need to do is we need to have a sum of how many employees are working for those columns. And the way that we can check this is using a sum function. But within the sum function, we're going to need to look at a case. So we're going to have the case function of when department equals, we'll say sports, then we want it to return 1, because we're going to sum all of the cases of when the department equals sports. And so if it returns 1, that'll give us a sum of all of the total cases that it's positive. In the else statement, we're going to return 0. And then we'll end our case statement at that. And so what this single line statement does is it returns a sum of all of the instances that the sports department occurs. And when it doesn't occur, it simply returns 0. And so it doesn't affect the total sum. And so what we can do is we can select a sum of the case when the department equals sports as our first column, a sum of the case when the department equals tools by returning a 1 when it does and a 0 when it doesn't for the second column. Then in the third column, a case when the department equals clothing, and in the fourth column, a sum of the case when the department equals computers. And then all of that is going to be sourced from the employees table. And so again, just to reiterate, we're going to have these 4 columns being returned. The first column is going to perform a case function on every record in the table, and every time the case equals sports, or the department equals sports, it's going to return a 1, which is then going to be aggregated by the sum function. And in the case that it's not sports, it's not going to aggregate anything, or it's going to sum 0, which is going to change the total sum. And then it ends that case, and that will all be returned as a total sum in the first column, which will be for sports. And then we're doing it again for tools, clothing, and computers. And so if we execute this query, we do indeed see the 4 columns here. Now, what we can do is actually, to make this a little bit more readable, we can add the aliases. So we'll do as sports total, as tools total, as clothing total, and as computers total. And that'll make it a little bit more readable with the column headers. So we run that again, and we have here sports total, tools total, clothing total, and computers total. And we have a total of 34, 39, 49, and 47 occurrences of each one of those departments. And so this has been an interesting way to approach this, and you can use this in all sorts of forms and factors to extract data in interesting ways. Hopefully it's been fun and educational. I can't wait to see everyone again back in the next video. And don't forget, stay curious.